Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, caffeine-friendly, beads-appreciating, crawfish tolerating weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and its fan base's sugar high. I'm Eric Hansen, not in TV clothes for the first time in a while on his show. He's Tyler James in his media party outfit, and we are the co-publishers, co-editors, and co-conspirators of everything at InsideNDSports.com. On tonight's show, we'll take you behind the scenes and in front of them, too, for number 7 seed Notre Dame's college football playoff quarterfinal matchup with number 2 Georgia Wednesday night at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. We'll have the latest news on the injury player availability front, a report from Monday's Irish practice. Want more? How about predictions, hypotheticals, and even some recruiting portal news? And as always, your questions. It's time to fill up the queue and buckle up. This is Football Never Sleeps.
All right. Well, before we get it rolling with the show, I'm coming to you live from New Orleans. I want to make sure that you are subscribed to us here on YouTube. It's free and it only costs you a click. And then it also lets you get comments and questions in during the show, and we want to hear from you. So please make sure you subscribe to allow yourself to do that. If you didn't get what you wanted for the holidays, or you're running way behind on your Christmas shopping, perhaps you can consider giving a Notre Dame fan or even yourself the gift of an InsideNDSports.com subscription. You can sign up for gift subscriptions from 1 month up to 5 years. You can do so at NotreDame.Rivals.com/gifts/purchase. And I've included the link in the video description below, so you don't have to type all that out. Then, as always, if you're not already a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com, you can sign up for a 30-day free trial of your own with promo code NDYT. There's a link in the video description below for that as well. That's all the plugs. I have no beads to give, but let's have a good show, Eric.
Okay, that sounds great. And maybe you could treat us to your whispery voice a little later in the show that you did on the highlights today. That was awesome. The password voice.
Yeah, Irish fan chimed in saying thanks for that, because I know for some people it's hard to follow those practice clips, although the views tend to get up there. I don't know if the views just go up because people have to rewind it to figure out who's who when they're watching on their own, but I'm happy to try to help people realize what they're actually seeing with guys moving around and not actually seeing all the numbers all the time.
Well, I learned something. Sometimes I don't even know what those drills are supposed to mean other than to trick us into not seeing anything. But I was pleased with today's result. So our opening drive is we're going to revisit the preseason storyline of the preseason, of the offseason, of the spring, and what it looks like 13 games later heading into the biggest game of Marcus Freeman's 3-year run as head coach. And that's from the offensive line. So let's break this down to some parts. We're not going to make you drink through a fire hose. Let's start with the news of the day from the offensive line. Rocco Spindler's status. What did you make of whether he'll play Wednesday night as the starting right guard or not?
Yeah, he says he's ready to go. He's been doing everything he can to get ready. Every time we've had chances to see some of practice, he's been out there working with the first team and going through drills. I wouldn't say he looks like his old self necessarily. You can definitely tell he's working with the bad hoof, but I think he's going to be ready to play in the game on Wednesday night with a taped up ankle and give it everything he has. I'm a little skeptical of how well he's going to be able to hold up. Like, will he be able to play the whole game? You know, Joe Rudolph even talked about when he got hurt against IU, like Rocco, he would recognize like, hey, myself in this form is not good enough for us. So I'm okay with sitting out, put Sam Pendleton in there, and we'll be better for it. So there may come a time when Notre Dame needs to get someone else in the game on Wednesday, but we'll see how that goes. I expect Rocco to give it a go and be out there, and we'll see what he can provide for Notre Dame. Okay,
now you set the stage for this next one, and I thought that was really interesting when you were talking to Joe Rudolph today. Charles Jaga's role. In between what Charles said, what Joe Rudolph told you, what's your sense of what might happen with Charles Jaga? Is he the number 2 right guard going into this game?
I think so. I get the sense that may be true. Now, they may still opt to put in Sam Pendleton before him if they really feel like that's what's best for them. But there's Joe Rudolph and Charles Jaga aren't closing the door on him being available to play. Now, maybe they're just being overly optimistic, and that's maybe not something that would happen. I know as we've been covering Charles's return, I've been very doubtful that he would play a role in any of Notre Dame's remaining games. But when I asked Joe Rudolph straight up, like, is he available? And he said, if we need him, yeah, we'll put him in. And he explained, like, he's been working at right guard in the number 2 role. That's allowed Sam Pendleton to take some backup center snaps with Notre Dame needing to get him prepared for that, just in case that bad news happens and Pat Coogan has to go out. So I think there's a chance it happens. I wouldn't guarantee it by any means, but it certainly is. It would be an interesting wrinkle if that's how, if he ends up in the game playing a role for Notre Dame after the way his season started with the preseason injury.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Joe Rudolph said that Sam Pendleton had been working more at center this week, so that they were solidifying that position. I will mention this, Tyler, since you can't get the feedback and I can give it to you before somebody else in the peanut gallery does. We need to get the people at the breakfast nook or whatever it is down there to give you some extra Belgian waffles, because every 15th word you say disappears because of the Wi-Fi. So,
oh no, I'm sorry. Maybe if I yell, it'll pick it up better.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so those were interesting, but it didn't end there. I thought you asked Joe about Billy Schrauth, and you said, has he been 100% ever during the season? And the first sentence out of his mouth didn't shock me until I started to think about all the All-Americans that Joe Rudolph has coached at the guard position, which is a handful of them. So go ahead and tell us what he said about Billy Schrauth, both in the context of your question and then the compliment he had for Billy Schrauth when he's at his best.
Yeah, well, when I asked him about him being healthy, he's like, "Well, yeah, at the beginning of the season he was." I was like, "Well, that wasn't what I meant. I meant since he had his ankle injury, has he been fully healthy since then?" But then he also said, like, Billy Schrauth is as good as an offensive guard as he's ever been around. So that's high praise for Joe Rudolph to say about Billy Schrauth. I think he's had ups and downs in terms of his play, and it's probably related to his health. Like, I thought he played really well against Army, and he's been a little bit up and down since then. He's one of those guys that's dealing with an ankle injury. Joe Rudolph also revealed that he had a tightrope surgery while he was out, which I don't know that was necessarily disclosed to us. That was news to me. And they were patient in getting him back out on the field. And they've been happy with what he's been able to give Notre Dame's offensive line because he is such a presence there inside.
And then let's talk a little bit about Anthony Knapp. Anthony had his own little press thing, and he talked about being a kid from Georgia and Georgia not recruiting him, which, we get the old chip on the shoulder thing. But I thought it was interesting how Joe Rudolph talked how Anthony was different than a lot of freshmen are in terms of growth curve. Can you fill our viewers in on that?
Yeah, he talked about how Knapp has really transcended beyond just doing his own job. It's something that he wanted to usually as a freshman, you're just like, take care of your own responsibility. And as long as you get that done, you're trying to survive out there and you move on to the next play. But he's trying to help the others around him. He's making sure he's being a very communicative teammate and seeing the whole field, being competitive and helpful. And I think that's made him a well-rounded left tackle, even though he does have his flaws, of course. He's really been a big benefit for Notre Dame this season.
So the format at Media Day at the Sugar Bowl, from Notre Dame's standpoint, Marcus Freeman had his press conference, and it wasn't particularly newsy. You get a lot of national guys that haven't been covering the team all year, and they want the big picture questions. However, it was a very newsy day because Tyler had access pretty much to anybody on the team that he wanted to talk to, with a few exceptions. And so we got a lot of information that way. But I want to take your temperature on this right now. Tyler, do we want to go to some questions from the queue first before we get into the next part of this?
We can get into some of the questions because I think some of them are related to some of the things that are being asked. Gary B says, have you learned what injury Carr suffered? Did he need surgery? What injury could have taken this long to heal and he's still not letting it rip? So no, CJ Carr, I asked him straight up, and there was a big scrum around him. I circled back with him later to have a one-on-one with him just to see if maybe that would help give us better answers. But when I asked even what the specific injury was, he said, honestly, I don't even know. And now, do you believe that, or is he just not wanting to tell us what exactly it was? I'm not sure. It is not something that he had surgery on, but he has been slowly working back. He's got basically 1 week left in this throwing progression that he's been working with. He throws a few times a week, so he's not necessarily throwing in every practice during the week. And yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame's been overly cautious with him because, one, they didn't need him this season, and two, they really want him to be ready for next season. So it's a bit of an odd situation in the way it's been handled and not necessarily been very transparent with. Like, Notre Dame puts out an injury report every week and he's never been on it, even though he's literally not throwing a football. So he's obviously not available to play quarterback for Notre Dame. But he's getting back there. Like, he was throwing in practice again today. The portion of practice that we see, they're not exactly throwing deep balls during, but he says he's 95% healthy as it relates to his right elbow. So that's pretty close, and he seems to be in good spirits about it and ready to get back out on the field in terms of helping out with the scout team if Notre Dame continues to win, and then getting into the quarterback competition this spring.
So we had a chance to see a practice over the weekend, and toward the end of that practice, I did see CJ Carr throw it down the field a little bit. Tim O'Malley did too. I don't know if you saw it, Tyler, because you were taking video and you were all over the place.
I got one video from like the other end of the field of him throwing to, I think, Kevin Bauman, but I couldn't necessarily tell how far it was. I was that far away that I had no like real depth.
And then what about today? What did you see from CJ today other than a scrum around him?
Yeah, today they were when I was watching the quarterbacks, they were just doing some light tosses to the quarterbacks coach Gino Gaduli and analyst Kurt Rawlings is his name. And they were doing some handoffs and throws to the outside, and then they were doing some like goal line corner fades and some in routes. So they weren't deep passes by any stretch, but he looked good. Like, if you said, hey, pick the quarterback out there who's dealing with an elbow issue, I don't know that you would have said, okay, it's definitely CJ Carr. He looks fairly normal, and I think the kind of quarterback that you would expect him to look like.
Okay.
Hopefully you can hear me. I'm really worried about this internet issue here.
So far, if not, I will start interpreting
okay.
your gibberish for English at some point. But so far, I think we're okay. Unless
right, cool.
Jeff Stevens tells us otherwise.
The fate of the show is in your hands, Jeff. No, I'm kidding. All right. Let's see. Is there any other injury-related questions? Okay, Scott Fegan. Hey, guys, any new info on the injury front with KVA as a question mark? Nothing
and
new.
For people that don't know who KVA is, it's Kingston Viliamuasa,
yes,
but we do call him KVA often.
Yeah, we do, although we were told earlier in the year, like, hey, no one around Notre Dame calls him that. But I think we've influenced that and made it a thing. But Kingston is practicing. He was practicing again today. He's wearing a brace on his right knee. He wasn't doing everything in this. Now, we only saw 15 minutes of practice. And at one point, while his linebacker teammates were doing something else, he was working with a trainer and talking to a trainer on the side. So I think they're being very careful with him. I wouldn't expect him to play a significant role necessarily in the game. I think he may be available, but maybe not in a big way. And I think what we are trending toward is maybe his availability ability will increase to a point where if Notre Dame keeps winning, that he can play more of a significant role in games. But I don't feel great about. I feel better about Rocco Spindler going out there and playing than I do about Kingston Viliamu-Asa. But I think he's going to try. He feels good. He's confident. He's testing it out, and we'll see what that looks like on Wednesday night.
I just looked at the hotel brochure, and it boasted of the high-speed dial-up connection of their internet. Okay, what do we got next? Or are we going on to the rest of the show?
No, I got some more. Will anyone other than Heinisch back up Cross and Rubio?
I think Armel Mucum may see a little bit of action. I think Heinisch plays both spots. And then when they're situational, like third and long situations, you may see one of the defensive ends kick inside, let's say Josh Burnham or Junior Tui Halamaka, and then either the one that's not kicked inside stays out in the Viper, or you bring down Jalen Snead or somebody like that, or Kingston Viliamu-Asa if he's available. So I think there's different ways to get there, but I think primarily it's going to be the Cross, Rubio, Heinisch show with some other little twists thrown in there.
Yeah.
And that was my brain on dial-up. That's why there were the pauses there.
That wasn't an internet issue. I think the little twist will include some Mucum reps, but I don't expect him to play a lot unless maybe he goes out there a little bit and has some success, and then they feel more confident in him getting out there and playing. But and maybe there's opportunities where they move Donovan Heinisch to the defensive tackle role, spelling Gabriel Rubio, and they put someone like Sean Sevillano Jr. at that nose tackle spot. So I think we'll probably see some other guys, but I do expect those three to be the main trio taking up the bulk of the reps at those defensive tackle positions. All right. Scott Fegan asks, how does the Notre Dame secondary match up against UGA's wide receivers?
Well, if they yell miss it, they have a pretty good chance of getting. We had Roddy Nabolsi on our podcast this weekend. Does a great job. Georgia may be, other than us, the best site on the Rivals Network. No, those guys are really, really good. And he was one of the best podcast guests in terms of really getting info about the other team. And Georgia leads the nation in drops and drop passes. Now, maybe they'll catch Gunnar Stockton's passes better. I like the matchup with Notre Dame secondary against Georgia, but I think that matchup gets better if there's a pass rush. And without your leading pass rusher, how do you make that part of it up? Do you blitz more? Can Donovan Heinisch get in there? Does Howard Cross get some push? Do you get more production from the edges? But you're going to have to get some pass rush, because nobody, I don't care how much they drop it, nobody can hold those receivers forever if you're not getting a pass rush.
I think Notre Dame has the ability to match up with Georgia's receivers. It's something you don't want to have to do the whole game all the time and be vulnerable when you don't have a pass rush, but I think Notre Dame's secondary is capable of limiting those receivers. Now, obviously, I think a big key is avoiding yards after the catch. So if you do give up a catch, make sure you take those guys to the ground. Make sure you don't give them opportunities to make a catch into a big play. All right, Mike DeVoy asks, Eric, in your years of covering Notre Dame football, have you seen a team lose so many key players and still perform at such a high level? I've been a fan for 60 years and certainly can't recall one.
The 2012 team had a lot of drama in the offseason and in fall camp. It didn't feel like they had them during the season. But when you think about what they had to do just to field a secondary that year, Kavari Russell, up until like the first few days of fall camp, was going to be a running back / wide receiver. And they were like, could you play the position that you tanked playing in high school? for us because we really need a cornerback and a starting cornerback. Bennett Jackson flipped over from the offense. And then, oh gosh, I can't remember his name. The kid that ended up playing for the Colts was one
Matthias
of
Farley.
Matthias Farley. He had been an offensive player. They flipped him over to defense. So there was a lot of problems during the offseason with cornerback injuries, with defections for one reason or another. It seemed like they had some on the offensive side of the ball too. And I've seen years where they've had a lot of injuries and they not end up with this kind of result where the injuries did take a toll. That they're this good with all those injuries, yes, Mike, I would say either we have the same memory issues or we're both right.
You guys are both blocking out the same team, but no. Joe Long says, is Onye still on the team? Couldn't he try interior? And no, Joe, Onye has been away from the team for personal reasons for most of the season now, and he's not. There's no indications that he will be returning to Notre Dame this season. All right. Jeff Stevens said, hey, Tyler, with Cam Williams and Brennan Vernon both seem to express some regret or adjustment to their first year. How was their demeanor? What else can you add from those two promising freshmen? Well, first, Vernon's a sophomore, right? I have that in my head, right? Or am I wrong there? Okay.
Yep.
So there is a difference there, but and I don't know that Cam Williams expressed some regret. I think he's open and honest and just spoke about like what he needed to do to get better. And everyone comes to Notre Dame hoping to play as a freshman, but everyone deals with the reality of that not happening in different ways. And Cam Williams seems to be someone that is learning from what he's being asked to do. He understands where his shortcomings are. I just posted notes on the Insider Lounge. That's what Jeff Stevens is referring to. If you don't know what the comments he's referring to are. So that's exclusive to our Inside Indie Sports subscribers. I spoke to both of those guys by myself at some point today. And Brennan Vernon talked about, he said like he didn't feel like he presented himself well last spring, and then has been making the transition from defensive end to defensive tackle. And so that has required some adjustments to the playing style and adjustments physically in terms of gaining weight. But they both seem very determined and focused on building on what they've been doing this season out of the spotlight with the scout teams. And we'll see what the rest of their career brings. I think because of the transfer portal era, there's so much worry about young players, which I understand. Like, if a young player isn't playing, a lot of those guys will seek the transfer portal, but that isn't always the case. There's plenty of development that still happens at the college football level from guys that make no impact at all as freshmen and end up being very, very good players. I mean, just look at Xavier Watts. And so I know there was questions on the message board about Cam Williams. It's like, he's just a freshman. Like, it's okay if he's not Jeremiah Smith, who's one of the freakiest freshmen in the history of college football. So I think there's still plenty of time for those guys to try to max out their career. And I would say personally, I think Cam Williams has maybe a brighter future than Brennan Vernon, but I wouldn't write off Brennan Vernon either.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, I mean, Golden Tate, who's Notre Dame's only Biletnikoff Award winner ever, barely played as a freshman.
Yeah. Oh, and I saw this comment from Joe Long about Brennan Vernon. He must not be willing to beef up. He told me he's up about 30 pounds since last fall. So he is beefing up. It's just not something that happens overnight. He is beefing up, and it's just something he's working on. And
the spring is going to be big for Vernon, and it's probably going to be a little bit telling. I think this fall, this is kind of what I expected when he was making that transition. So we'll see if he starts to make some progress in the spring.
All right, Brian Habermill asked, we love Tyler and Eric. Quick one today. Tyler, what was the most enjoyable interaction with a player or coach today? I really enjoyed the conversation I had with Joe Rudolph. I thought he was very open and insightful when speaking with him. I liked talking to Cam Williams. It was nice to catch up with him. He was talking about Mike Brown, the wide receivers coach, yells at him to just run. I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, you're not running? He's like, well, no, I'm running, but sometimes I'm not necessarily like accelerating off the ball in the right way. And so it sounds silly. He's like, he said it sounds kind of funny as someone who has good speed. Like, I consider myself fast, but I've learned that I'm not always running and using that in the way that I can. So that sort of gets to what that question that I just answered from Jeff. Like, he seemed to be in a good frame of mind and not like down on himself or down on his luck. And I thought it was a fun conversation to have.
Let me follow up on your Cam Williams thoughts. And I loved the Joe Rudolph interview. I thought it was really valuable. But with the two guys that they've got in the portal so far, one's a boundary receiver. Will Pauling, do you see him slot or do you see him maybe competing outside? Because right now, if he's a slot guy, then it's Jordan Faison and kind of an open lane for one of the younger receivers to run up and grab and get a spot in a rotation, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, considering everyone's deciding to announce transfers around Christmas, I haven't spent a ton of time considering what Will Pauling will do in the future for Notre Dame, like where they see him best fitting. So yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame's in a spot where they just figure out how to get their best receivers on the field, and they're not necessarily worried about a guy whether he's a slot or a field receiver because they have sort of.
I think he'll
be. Them.
I do think he'll be a slot, but I didn't know if you would talk to somebody differently.
I have not heard anything differently, but I have not also done much digging on it either.
You're still doing your Christmas shopping. You're getting those gift subscriptions for Rivals.
That's right. I also wanted to say Charles Jaga was fun to talk to. Like, he's a very insightful player, and to hear like his process of dealing with his injury. I thought was insightful, and he sort of talked about when he was coming back from his knee injury, like there were these milestones and checkpoints that you sort of knew and could sort of feel the progress of, but like when you're returning from a torn pectoral muscle, it's a lot of just waiting, and then they finally tell you can do something, and then you just sort of wait for a while again, and then they tell you can do something else. So I think those are the things that I was able to discuss with Charles Jaga today. All right. Scott Fegan says, Eric and Tyler, please finish this sentence. Notre Dame wins on Wednesday if they can blank.
Score more points than Georgia. I would say if they can be talking about an offensive line, defensive line driven program, just like they did in the IU press conference. If they're singing the praises of those two units, that means everybody did well, I think.
Yeah, I think that's makes a lot of sense. I think Notre Dame's pass rush impacts the game. Maybe that's I think a lot the Notre Dame's defensive line is where my biggest concern is right now. I feel like I'm a little bit nervous about how Notre Dame's offensive line is going to hold up as well. But the defensive line.
So you're just twisting my answer and making it longer.
Yeah. Well, I got to say something, Eric. I mean, I know the internet doesn't always. I know the internet doesn't always want me to here. The Sheridan.
Just make a frowny face and point to me.
But yeah. All right, let's get to this question that was submitted from Terrence Moore in Atlanta. Is field goal kicking a concern, given how good Georgia's kicker is, and how things have gone recently for Notre Dame in that department?
I'll tell you what, Peyton Woodring is one of the best kickers in the country. He was 20-22 this year, which is 90.9%. And he was inside the 50. He was perfect. He was 3 of 50 from 50 plus with a long of 55. He didn't have any blocked. So you figure Georgia is in a pretty good place. They did lose their punter, but not their kicker. As far as Jeter, Tyler, you talked to Jeter today, correct?
I did, yes.
And we saw him. I saw him kicking this weekend in South Bend, and he looked like the Mitch Jeter of old. He banged a couple, one from 54 and one from 55. It would have been good from over 60, and it was accurate. Now, we saw him the practice before we got in hit the goal post with one of them and miss one. But this practice, he looked pretty good. This was post IU. The other one was pre IU. So, Tyler, what's your sense of what you saw or what you talked to, heard today?
Yeah, he said he's full strength. One thing I asked him about was as he was coming back from his injury and he's then missing kicks, I said, was that a mental issue? And he said no. It was not a mental issue. He approaches every kick the same. Now, I don't know. I think that's someone that's projecting confidence, whereas maybe that confidence wasn't showing up on the field. But I think I have to think that the IU making the 49-yarder against IU really energized him. I mean, if you watched the video that Notre Dame put out after the game, like he's yelling, "I'm back" after he makes that.
And I tweeted he's back.
Now obviously he ends up getting a field goal blocked later. So that is an ongoing issue that he has to work with here, but doesn't have to worry about cold weather. He's back playing against Georgia, which he's done every year of his college career. So maybe playing against an SEC opponent will make him feel more comfortable, and he'll be able to regain the accuracy that he had at South Carolina. All right, Rajon says, how many early enrollees are already with the team in New Orleans? Do you have the list, Eric, or you want me to give it to him?
I think that there's 4, right, that are with the team. And there was a new one today, was Blake Hebert, the quarterback. And then it's Jadon Blair. And I'm probably mispronouncing it. Is it Jadon?
Yeah, I think you're doing it right. Yeah.
Jadon Blair. And then
it's actually Jadon.
But yay. And then Madam Framo. And then who am I missing?
Ethan Long is the last
Ethan
one.
Long.
Fellow safety.
Okay.
And I think worth noting, Jadon Blair in the practice we saw back on campus, he was wearing a blue jersey, which means he's playing offense. So he's playing some scout team wide receiver for Notre Dame. He's got incredible size. Like if you see, he stands out even in Notre Dame's like stretching lines. You're like, wow, look at Jadon Blair. So I think obviously
it's a brand.
To be clear, these guys can't play in this game, any of the playoff games. Like early enrollees, mid-year transfers cannot play, even if the game is occurring when the next semester starts. There is a rule that forbids that. So these guys aren't playing; they're just helping. You're getting used to college football, getting to experience something pretty cool. When this is a little bit cooler than going to El Paso for the Sun Bowl. As much as I love my time down in El Paso last year, what CJ Carr was able to do, like to be a part of the college football playoff, has got to be a pretty cool experience for these guys who were high school seniors just a couple weeks ago. So those 4 are with the team and helping out. And like you mentioned, Blake Hebert, we did not see him at practice when we were back on campus, but we had known that he was supposed to be with the team. And so today was the first time we got to actually see him out on the practice field. I don't even know that I saw him throw a pass because the times when I was watching him, he was just running some play fakes as a member of the scout team. But so a bright future for those guys. Madden Framo looks like someone who could play right now. Like someone on Twitter is arguing with me saying, well, no, he couldn't. He doesn't know the defense. I was like, well, I'm not being literal, man. He can't actually play. It's like he's physically capable of playing. Like he looks like a college football player and he runs like one too. So I think a lot to be excited about there.
Well, Kingston's mom took a picture with both him and Kingston, and like as if, yeah, I'm adopting him. This kid is awesome. But her grocery bill would double if he was in that household.
All right, I think that's all the questions I have right now. If you guys have more questions, well, I can answer this one from Jeff. We're going to answer it later anyways, but will Bob Orton join you for a joyful post game?
Yes, and we are going to do it much closer to the very end of the game, like probably 5 minutes after Bob will join me. The Indiana game was weird because we couldn't do it on campus, and we were both on campus, so we had to drive home first, and I had to do the press conference, which was the longest press conference we've had this year because the CFP was involved, so they had the coordinators and everything else come up. So we started at 1:20 in the morning. Not that we'll start a lot earlier than that, but it'll be right after the game. So thank you for plugging that. We will be doing that 5 minutes after the final whistle or the eighth overtime, whichever comes first.
All right.
Okay.
What else you got for us, Eric?
Okay, so we're going to go beyond the head coach's press conferences and talk about some of the players more connected to this game. So I wrote Gabe Rubio down twice. I was so excited about him. So what did you learn about Gabe Rubio today?
Well, I hate to break it to you, Eric. They will only be allowed to dress one Gabe Rubio on Wednesday. They will not. They've not been able to clone him, which they may be able to, they would need potentially, but he's ready to go. It's pretty wild how he is in the spotlight here at the end of the season, given how strange of a year this has been for him. Someone that was away from the team in the spring, first preseason camp practice, goes out with an injury, misses a bunch of time to start the season. He told me today that the first time that he felt really good was the week of the Army game. So like he has not been fully healthy for very long. And he said, every week I feel better and better. And so that's encouraging news going into a game where he's going to be asked to start and play a big role. We'll see how he fares, but it's kind of neat to see how he's sort of been thrust to this position and is ready for the challenge ahead of him.
Now, there was news floating around today that he said, yeah, I'm coming back next year. And it's kind of a twisted storyline because I think most people assumed he was. He has another year. If he was going to leave Notre Dame, he would have probably left last spring when he wasn't at school. Right. And he stuck around, and he's got a chance to start next year. But there was an inadvertent slip of somebody reporting or whatever that he was in the portal and then taking that back. And so the announcement that he's coming back is a little bit water is wet kind of thing. But so he is expected back in 2025.
Yeah. And I mean, I would just add, like, no one's going to, like, he's about to start on Wednesday night. He's not going to say, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm coming back next year. Like, he's got so much more on his plate right now that he's going to say, of course. Like, I'm not saying he's not coming back and he's lying to us or anything, but, like, a lot can change between now and next season. Notre Dame's going to be active in the transfer portal and bringing in some defensive
did
tackles.
That to us once.
Yeah, Will Fuller infamously did that. So, like, it doesn't matter what someone says today when, like, Notre Dame's players will still have a transfer portal window that they can still enter themselves. And then obviously Notre Dame's continuing to work on bringing in some more guys as well. So that's good that Gabe Rubio intends to come back, at least as of right now. And Notre Dame, it's a big question mark going into the season, Notre Dame's defensive tackle positions, because Notre Dame will be losing Howard Cross and Riley Mills.
Okay. And so the first practice we saw Jeremiah Love this offseason or this postseason, he had a brace the size of Rhode Island. The second time we saw him, it was a compression sleeve. And then today, what did he look like in practice that you saw?
He looked good. He didn't have any sort of brace or anything. It should be added for anyone who hasn't seen the clips we shared on YouTube earlier today. Notre Dame wasn't in pads, at least while we were there. I don't know if they put them on after we left, but it seemed more like a walkthrough today than a physical practice. And so but for instance, Kingston Viliamuasa is wearing a knee brace, but his obviously knee injury was more serious than Jeremiah Love's was. But I'm not concerned about that. I didn't talk to him today, so I don't know the status of his flu or flu-like symptoms that he was dealing with for the Indiana game. But hopefully he's feeling healthy, and we can name all these different X factors in the game, but if Jeremiah Love is playing his best, like that's about as good of a thing you can have going in the right way for Notre Dame.
Okay, and then this is kind of unrelated today and kind of related today. It feels like there had to be an announcement saying, well, Notre Dame's not pursuing a portal quarterback. So what's all that about?
Honestly, I don't know what all of it is about. It's the latest rumor was being peddled by Colin Cowherd. He mentioned something on one of his platforms, and then it was pretty quickly shut down through sourcing across to anyone who was hearing from people saying Notre Dame is not going after a portal quarterback. So I don't 100% know what's going on there. Notre Dame continues to be adamant that it's not going after a transfer portal quarterback. Obviously, that could change if Notre Dame loses some of its current quarterbacks. I don't know where these rumors are coming from. Maybe someone is trying to get one of Notre Dame's quarterbacks to leave by suggesting this. Maybe someone is trying to drive up the price on their quarterback by making it seem like Notre Dame's going to take them. Maybe people are making things up. That wouldn't be the first time, unfortunately, because I didn't see Notre Dame playing in black uniforms against IU. And maybe we're all being lied to, and Notre Dame ends up with a quarterback out of the portal. I don't know. I don't know that I 100% trust anything right now, but I don't think Notre Dame's going to look for a starting quarterback in the portal for next season.
Okay, let's get back to reality. Anything else at practice that jumped out at you that you feel like you want to share with our viewers?
Not necessarily. It was more productive in terms of football than what Georgia's team did during their media viewing window, which they did yoga. But there wasn't
awesome.
A lot of like.
Oh, my mom will love that.
Yeah, well, I think it's like a tradition. I think they've done that in the past. Notre Dame was doing some, like I said, they weren't wearing pads, doing some light drills. So there wasn't a lot to take away from. It was more like making sure everyone's there. No one got stuck on Bourbon Street. But it looked like everything was in a good shape for Notre Dame, and everyone's gearing up for the big game, obviously.
Okay, we have a 2-minute drill coming up of 5 questions. Do you want to do that, or do you want to go back to the questions from our viewers if there are any new ones?
We can go to some questions. Let me get a few of them. Jeff Stevens says, okay, the Eternal Optimist asks, how much analyst time is Notre Dame devoting to a potential next college football playoff opponent?
I'm sure there are people that are working on that. That would make some sense. That's an 8-day turnaround, and you're the last game playing on the 1st, and you would be playing on the 9th and not the 10th. So I'm sure that they have some analysts looking at that.
Yeah, there's some advanced scouting that Notre Dame could do there. I don't know how to put a number on how much time is being spent on that. Scott Fegan says, other than Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love, or Xavier Watts, who are the players of the game for Notre Dame to win?
Ooh, that's one of our questions, but we'll go. I phrased it a little bit different. I mean, I think what Tyler and I have been saying about the offensive line and defensive line having to have a good game, I think Howard Cross is a guy that, because of he doesn't play the same position as Riley Mills, but he's going to have to impact the game. If he doesn't have a good game, that's not a good sign. I guess we'll just take that out of the 2-minute drill. I think if Notre Dame wins, the MVP will be Love, and that means a lot of other people did their job, that he's the story of the game. If he's the MVP of the game, that's a good sign for Notre Dame. That means the defense played well, the offensive line played well. Riley didn't throw 8 interceptions. So that would be my pick. But, I mean, all those guys have to play well. This is
Yeah,
Georgia.
I mean, it could be. Yeah. I mean, it could be anyone that like someone else could force a turnover, right? Like it could be a cornerback that gets an interception or a defensive lineman that gets a strip sack. I like Howard Cross would be certainly a viable candidate there. I think he's going to play a significant role. I'm curious if someone else on that defensive line can step up, whether it's Joshua Burnham, maybe Bryce Young does something and continues to expand his role. Maybe Donovan Heinrich or Gabe Rubio are guys that have great games and really, really sort of break out in a moment like this. So I think that's what's exciting about a game like this, that having a big game in a moment like this is going to be a serious shot in the arm for whoever that is. Even if it says Jeremiah Love, like that would just only build on what people are talking about as a Heisman candidate for next season. All right, Brian Habermill says, did Tyler Buckner say he's at ND next year too? I did not talk to Tyler Buckner. I believe he did tell some other reporters that, excuse me, and I'm not sure who that was. Otherwise, I'd give them credit for that. But and he may have told multiple people that. I'm not certain, but it's not surprising to me. And certainly, if Notre Dame, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Notre Dame's offseason. And if Notre Dame does lose some quarterbacks, does Tyler Buckner rejoin the quarterback room? It didn't make sense for him to do that this year because like that felt like an extra distraction. But maybe if the numbers dictate that next year, that's something he could do. But he'll always have some potential fake punt and fake field goal opportunities as long as Marty Biaggi's around, it sounds like. So, yeah. And then also continuing to play lacrosse. And I mean, there's a chance that ends up being a more successful lacrosse player at this rate.
Yeah, well, Kevin Corgan said had Tyler not played football, he would have had a shot to flip from defense to offense and be one of their main guys on offense. Because he didn't, he'll probably end up playing defense, which he did a good job with. But he really wanted to do this football thing, and that's why it doesn't surprise me. And he's been an unselfish player, and we've seen him in these postseason practices running pass routes in drills and so forth, and he doesn't look out of place doing that. But I mean, he really helped them during the Army and Navy prep, being such a good scout team quarterback.
Yeah, tremendous teammate. Someone that obviously cares a lot about Notre Dame, so good to have him around. And I think when he first came back to Notre Dame, people were like, "Well, this is kind of weird, isn't it? Like, why would Notre Dame be into this?" But I think the more you know Tyler Buckner, the more you listen to people that have been around him, it makes a lot of sense for what he even helped, like Riley Leonard at the beginning of the season when he was struggling. Riley Leonard credited Tyler Buckner for talking to him and explaining what it feels like to be in a situation that you don't like being in as Notre Dame's quarterback. All right, you continue, Eric. I'm going to time out old Spiffy McGee because I don't know that we need to read his Notre Dame's Georgia score prediction once more.
Okay. All right. So we have a 2-minute drill. It was 5 questions, so it may be a minute 52 drill. And here goes. We're taking one of these out. If you could have any injured player back for ND at his best, so no rust, he's not coming back after a long layoff, who would you plug in this game?
This was a tough one for me. I'm going to milk the clock here in the 2-minute drill, but I went with Riley Mills, although Boubacar Traore is a close second for me. What he can do off the edge is just intriguing to me. We didn't get to see that fully blossom this season because his injury came so early on, but if we imagine a world where he doesn't get hurt and he develops and progresses the way we expected him to this season, I think he would be a really, really important weapon for Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah, for me, it came down to 3 players. I mean, there's some people on offense I guess you could do, and certainly Benjamin Morrison, but Leonard Moore's playing so well. To me, it came down to Mills, Botello, and Traore. because if you take one of those Viper ends, then you can move Josh Burnham back to the other side, and then it's Burnham and Bryce Young and not having to rely on Oben that much. But I think in this particular game, I think I would go with Riley Mills, just maybe because I'm familiar with what he can do at this point. Okay, number 2, if you could plug in any player, and we'll say starter from the 2020 playoff team, who would you pick? Now, here's the trick. Riley Mills started in that 2020 playoff game, but you get that version of him. You don't get this version of him.
There's a lot of talented players on that roster that I think you'd want to have. Kyle Hamilton is so good that it's just like, well, why wouldn't you just add Kyle Hamilton to your team and shut up and move on? But I think I would go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Even as good as Notre Dame's linebackers have been, like they have not been Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a Butkus Award winner. So I would probably go with him. I would hear an argument for Ade Ogundeji as someone that could rush the passer off the edge and also be productive stopping the run. But I think those are the top 3 guys in my opinion. You can't really go wrong with any of them, but Hamilton and JOK aren't necessarily guys that are at positions of need, but they were next level talents.
Right. I narrowed it to 4 and then I narrowed it to 1. I put 2 offensive players on this. I put Liam Eichenberg just because he would upgrade you at tackle. Although if it were Joe Alt, it would make an easier argument. Michael Mayer, although you may get a pretty good version of Mitchell Evans in this game. So would Mayer upgrade it to the point that it could make a huge difference on offense? And so then it really came down to the Hamilton, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And like, well, you got a 2-time All-American safety and other safeties that play pretty well. How much better can their pass defense get with Hamilton? And it would get better. But JOK does so many things. He can rush the passer. He can stop the run. He can cover a slot receiver. He can cover a tight end. There's just so much to his game that would be my pick. Okay,
yeah,
we're gonna
like Al Golden coaching Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah would be something pretty interesting.
Okay, we skipped question number 3 because we already answered it. So number 4, are you sold that Mitch Jeter could kick a 45-yarder to win the game if it called for that?
Could, yes. Would I want to be in that situation? Not necessarily.
That's not the question. Yeah. Are you sold is the question.
No, I would say no. I'm not sold then. But I think he's getting back to a spot where you could be more confident about that.
Okay. If it came down to you had to name your firstborn turnip if he missed, and you get $100,000 if he made it, what would you pick?
Wait, what?
Never mind. Okay.
I think he'd miss. Why would I want? I'm getting punished for.
I'm saying yes. I'm going with Mitch Jeter. I'm on the Mitch Jeter. He's back. He's back, baby. I'll do the George Costanza thing. He's back, baby. Okay. And the last one, will ND be in the college football playoff next season? Whether it be 12 teams or 14 teams.
I'm just gonna say no. I think a year out, we're always probably overestimating how good the opponents on Notre Dame's schedule will be. But I think Notre Dame's schedule next year will be tougher than this year's. And Notre Dame's going to have a new quarterback. I think the offensive line should be great. But those defensive tackles obviously need to be replaced. You got to replace Xavier Watts. So I'm going no. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they do get back to the playoff. But at this point right now, I don't know that I'm tremendously confident in it.
I think between recruiting, development, and the portal, they do make it back. But I do think the schedule's a lot more difficult. They open at Miami. They have Texas A&M at home pretty early in the season. They have Boise State pretty early in the season without Ashton Jeanty, but Boise State nevertheless. I mean, that's your That's your substitute for Northern Illinois. That's your bye game where you don't have to return the trip. It's a pretty difficult schedule, and we don't know who the 12th team is yet. Okay, do we want to jump into recruiting or jump into the question portal here?
Let's jump into the question portal because I don't know anything going on recruiting wise. I think I did report on a couple guys that are looking to visit. January 25th is going to be Notre Dame's junior day. So that's obviously would be.
So is this a dead period right now, so to speak, for high school recruiting?
I think so, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I think it is.
Okay.
Because usually it's dead period when the all.
If you don't know the answer, just pretend that the internet's not working.
The Under Armour All-America game is happening this week, so usually when those games are going on, it's usually a dead period. So I think it's.
I think Notre Dame has only Eric Schmidt in that, right? The kicker punter.
Yes, correct. So January 25th is the junior day. That will be Notre Dame's turning its attention to the 2026 class. We'll be reporting on who those guys are going to be as it comes closer. But if you want some of that information, it is already on the Insider Lounge. All right, Bob Alvey says, do you expect Mucom to make an impact in this game, or is it wishful thinking?
I would be surprised. I mean, he was training camp surprised that he was even on the verge of being in the rotation. And I think they feel really good about where his career is going, where his learning curve is going. But he's played 60 snaps, none of them really in high leverage situations this year. I would be surprised if he impacts the game. If he is, wow, what a story that'll be.
Yeah, it feels more like wishful thinking. I would not predict that it's going to happen on Wednesday, but if you look at Armel Mucom and his growth and how much bigger he's gotten, I'm intrigued by his future. But it's one thing to be intrigued by your future, and it's another thing to show out against Georgia. That's not an easy task. So
right, Georgia's interior offensive line is really good. One of their guys, at least Rutledge, is first team All-American. I voted for him.
Yeah, that was a good one, Joe. The like button is getting lonely, boys. Los lonely boys. Yes, make sure you hit the like button. We appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Eric, anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Just all our content that we've got this week, including our two post-game shows. Bob Morton and I will do the Into the End Zone show 5 minutes after the final whistle. Tyler and I.
You guys don't have a cooling off period?
We don't have a cooling off period. Tyler and I do have a cooling off period. We'll be heavily caffeinated and do it in the middle of the night. So just wake up the next morning. If you're hungover, this is what you'll have to look at. So prepare. You may have to start drinking again. But we'll be doing that. I think I'm doing my live chat on Friday this week instead of Thursday. I think Thursday would be really stupid to do it that day. So we'll give it we'll have a cooling off period or a warming up period, whatever the result will be. And thanks as always to Piano Man Steve Lundgren for our jingle that starts the show.
Let's squeeze one more question in here that Ed submitted before the buzzer. Irish have faced some of the best running teams this year and shut them down. Georgia will have to pass to win. I don't see that happening with a new quarterback. Do you agree?
I don't know that Georgia's rushing attack matches up to what it is statistically. They were 98th after the season in rushing offense. They rushed for a little bit more than 4 yards a carry, but they haven't had a healthy Trevor Etienne this year. I think that helps. Gunnar Stockton's wheels as a quarterback helps, and Riley Mills not being in the mix all helps Georgia's rushing attack. However, if Al Golden could put a game plan together and a performance together to force Gunnar Stockton to be a drop back passer and rely on his right arm, I think that really favors Notre Dame in this matchup, especially if it's a clean an even turnover game for Notre Dame, and it hasn't been even for Georgia all year. They are, I think, the worst team in turnover margin in the field, Notre Dame is the best at number 2 in the country overall. But I like where you're going with that, Ed. I like that strategy.
Yeah, it's been the Georgia running game is hard to get a sense for just because they've had so many injuries. Obviously, they felt more comfortable throwing the football and then had success doing that too. So what does that look like now? How do they use Gunnar Stockton as a running quarterback, and how does that influence Notre Dame's ability to stop the run? All things I'm looking forward to learning on Wednesday. And I do feel good about Notre Dame's chances in slowing down the run. I actually think Mills is a bigger loss in terms of a pass rusher than against the run, because I think Gabe Rubio is a pretty capable run defender, but he's not the same kind of pass rusher that Riley Mills have. Now, obviously, you'd rather have Riley Mills just in general.
Well, you're really going from Riley Mills to Armel Mucum because you had Rubio before.
Right.
So
right. The
that's
drop
the
off
tandem.
there.
The tandem changes.
Yeah, and yeah, like Gabriel Rubio's not going to be as fresh of a version of Gabriel Rubio too, because he's going to probably be playing more and being asked to do more than he's done all season. Yes, Jeff, I have the official media hospitality room Sugar Bowl cup that I've been drinking. I thought about wearing my Sugar Bowl sweatshirt, but it's not cold enough to wear a sweatshirt in here. So.
I thought you should have worn beads. I have my official Pete Chiavarelli mug of him lifting up Ara Parsegian that he gave me.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, like as Eric mentioned, after the game, Eric will be live with Bob Morton.
Coffee spilling off of it.
That's one of a kind coffee. Eric will be live with Bob Morton for Into the End Zone. We'll have our post-game takeaways. And also tomorrow, Eric and I got a scheduled time to record this. We'll have our Place Your Bets predictions up on YouTube on Tuesday to help preview the game. So appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, and we will talk to you soon.